You're working harder than ever, and yet you're in exactly the same place. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And this pattern has a name. Look, I'm going to ask you a question that most people avoid answering honestly. When was the last time you actually stopped, really stopped, and asked yourself why? Life isn't where you imagined it would be by now. Not the life you post. Not the version you show on Instagram or Facebook. The real life. The bank account at the end of the month. The feeling you get at 2 in the morning when the world is already asleep and it's just you and your thoughts. I know what that's like. And I know that most people, including you, probably have heard so many things about discipline, about habits, about mindset, that instead of helping, all of it has turned into background noise, a sound you can no longer even distinguish. But what nobody told you, what actually matters, is that the problem isn't a lack of information. The problem is the way you're living your day-to-day. If you watch until the end, the way you see success and money may never be the same again. This video is part 1 of a trilogy that I made with a lot of care. In the next parts, we're going to dive even deeper into how to rewrite your identity and into how to activate a system that the most successful people on the planet use without even talking about it. But what happens here, in this part 1, is where everything begins. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why. Imagine this. You're in a car, driving down the interstate, one of those long roads in the United States, you know, where you can drive for hours and hours without seeing anything other than desert and sky. And you have the GPS on, but the GPS is pointing to the wrong place. And you don't realize it because the road seems normal. The car is running, the music is playing, and everything seems fine. Now imagine you drove like that for 3 years. 3 years in the wrong direction. That's exactly what happens with most people when it comes to financial life and personal direction. It's not that they're not putting in effort. It's that the effort is being applied in a direction that leads nowhere. The problem isn't how much you work. It's where your work is taking you. I spent years in a situation like that. And it wasn't because I was lazy. Quite the opposite. I worked. I studied. I read books about success, about finances, about everything. But at the end of the day, I looked at myself in the mirror and the bank account says everything that words can't hide. And that's when I started paying attention to something that changed everything. It changed the way I saw myself. It changed the way I made decisions. And it changed, in a physical and measurable way, the results in my life. This something isn't a hack. It's not a secret that someone is hiding. It's something written in plain text right in front of all of us. But that most people simply can't see because they're too close to notice it. Most people wake up in the morning with a script already written in their head. Not a script they created with purpose. A script that was written by years of conditioning, by ads, by other people's opinions, by family expectations, by that internal voice that says, you're not the type of person who wins. And that voice, that frequency, so to speak, literally determines every choice you make throughout the day. You don't choose your breakfast by coincidence. You don't choose how to react to your boss by coincidence. You don't choose to accept or decline an opportunity by coincidence. You do all of this based on a program that's been running in your head for a program that I'm going to call, throughout this video, the poverty. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about the way you relate to time, to energy, to possibilities, to yourself. Now, I know this might seem heavy. And maybe you're thinking, but I'm not doing that badly. And that's fine. Maybe your life is okay. But if some part of you, a small part, that voice that speaks during the early hours, if some part of you feels that there's a gap between where you are and where you should be, then this conversation is for you, because the secret isn't in working more. It's in changing the way you're programmed to function. And that's what we're going to deconstruct together, here, in this part 1. Let me tell you a story that happened to me on an ordinary Tuesday. And I need you to read between the lines what this means for your life too. It was early morning. I hadn't even finished my coffee yet. And I was, at that moment, the most tired version of myself that had ever. Not tired in the body, tired in the way I saw things. Tired of pushing without seeing direction. And then, because sometimes life does this, I had a meeting with someone who changed the way I thought about decisions. It wasn't a motivational speech. It was a 3-minute conversation in a small room with a cold coffee in hand. And this person asked me a question I was never going to forget. But I'll tell you what that question was in a moment. First, I need to show you why that question matters so much. Your results aren't accidents. They're the shadow of your daily decisions. There's a piece of research that I think is fundamental, and it was done by Carol. Dweck, one of the biggest voices in modern psychology. Dweck spent decades studying the way the human mind processes challenges. And what she discovered was this: people who believe their abilities are fixed, that they're born with talent or they're not, systematically underperform compared to people who believe that the mind can be shaped and grown over time. It's not a small difference. It's the difference between stagnation and transformation. And here's the part that most people ignore. This belief isn't something you consciously choose every morning. It's embedded in how you make every micro decision throughout the day, in how you react to the first obstacle, in how you feel after a small failure, in how much energy you invest in a task that truly matters versus a task that urgent but isn't. That's the practical execution of what we call discipline. It's not the discipline you see in movies, that soldier at the military base at 5 in the morning. Real discipline is quieter than that. It's the way you align your actions with the version of yourself you want to. And this leads to the concept that is central to everything we're going to. In this video, the idea that you're not failing because of a lack of willpower. You're failing because you're operating from the wrong identity. This is where most people fail. Imagine you want to change your relationship with money. You want to save. You want to invest. You want real financial direction. And then you make a plan. You start well for 3, maybe 4 days. And then you go back to where you've always been. And what most people do at that moment is criticize themselves. I don't have discipline. I'm not strong enough. But the truth that this research and this whole experience taught, is that you didn't go back because you're weak. You went back because the deepest part of you still believes you don't belong in a different place. Your identity is still fixed on an old version. A version that didn't go to the growth seminar. A version that didn't review the budget on Sunday night. A version that believed financial success was for other people. And as long as that identity doesn't change, no plan is going to last. That's what part 2 of this series is going to address in depth. The way you rewrite that identity from the inside out. But for now, what matters is that you start seeing this. Now, here's an important moment in this conversation, and I ask you not to rush past it. If this video is touching you in some way, if you're feeling that sensation of this is exactly what I needed to hear, the best thing you can do right now is a small but powerful gesture. Like this video, follow the channel, and comment down below what resonated with you. Not because I need the numbers, but because that gesture, that small conscious action, is literally the first exercise in changing the program that we're going to talk about. Every action aligned with your real intention strengthens the new frequency. And speaking of action aligned with intention, in the first pinned comment on video, I left a guide that I myself use in my daily routine. It's called 7 Days to Recover Focus, Energy and Clarity. And inside it, there are 21 mental activations that, even on the most chaotic days, it costs less than a coffee, but can save you years of confusion and effort without direction. If you want, check it out. But even if you don't grab it, stay here, because what comes next is where things get really heavy. Let me ask you a direct question. Do you know anyone, one person, maybe 2, who seems to have everything easier? Not because they're smarter, not because they had more luck, but because something about the way they move through the world seems different, seems more directed, more deliberate. Do you know anyone like that? I do. And in recent years, I've had the opportunity to study and talk to people in that situation in a very direct way. And what all of them have in common isn't a mansion secret. It's a simple thing that most people can't do because they're so busy running that they never stop to execute it. They have clear financial direction, not a financial plan. Plans anyone can make, direction. And there's a huge difference between the two. A plan without direction is like a map without a destination. It keeps you busy, but it doesn't take you anywhere. Imagine this like a Scorsese movie. That dark environment, the low music, and the main character sitting at a table in a room with no windows, looking at a number on a screen. He's not working more than the others. He's not sweating more, but he's seeing something that the others can't see. He sees the trajectory, not the effort of the moment, the entire trajectory. And that ability to see beyond the immediate is literally what separates a high-value life from a life that's eternally working to get there. Now, here's what I observed in lives that I admired and studied in depth. The most successful people didn't first solve the financial part and then change how they felt. They first changed how they felt, how they related to time, to energy, to purpose, and the financial part was the natural consequence. This isn't motivational, it's structural. Money flows to where there's clarity, and clarity comes from within. One of the people who studied this dynamic the most was Robert Greene. If you've read The Laws of Human Nature, you'll recognize this logic. Greene spends entire years analyzing how the most influential people in history, decisions, and the pattern that emerges is always the same. They didn't react to their environment. They created the environment around them. And that's exactly what I want you to start seeing as possible for yourself. Not tomorrow, not after life slows down, now, with the resources you have. I know this seems grand, and actually, sit with that feeling for a second. Because in part 2 of this series, we're going to dissect exactly how an ordinary person, not a CEO, not an heir, how an ordinary person executes this frequency change in their financial life in a real and sustainable way. But for now, what matters is that you start asking the right question. Not how do I make more money, but what is the real direction of my life? And is my day-to-day aligned with that direction? If the answer is no, then you're in exactly the right place. And if you're curious about what the first practical steps are to create that direction, comment down below. Write the word direction in the comments. That's going to help me understand what you need so I can create even more content in the next parts of the series. If you forget everything I said until now, remember this: money is the last thing that changes. The first thing that changes is who you are. I know this seems abstract, so let me show you in a concrete way what this means in practice. Think about a person who grew up in a house where nobody talked about investing, where the pattern was work, pay the bills, have a little left over at the end of the month, and repeat. This person goes to school, goes to work, starts making money. And what do they do with that money? Exactly what they learned they should do. Expenses that seem normal, choices that seem natural, not because they're lazy, not because they don't want more, but because their identity, their idea of who they are, is still stuck in that place. And here comes the part that very few people talk about: the personal energy. Person carries is directly shaped by the identity they maintain. If you see yourself as someone who's always behind, your energy will reflect. If you see yourself as someone who's building, your energy changes. And it's not a metaphor, it's neurology. James Clear, who wrote one of the most important books about habits in recent, describes a model that I think is fundamental. The idea that real change starts with action. It starts with the belief about who you are. When you start seeing yourself as the person who has already made that change, your actions naturally reorganize around that new vision. That's what I call self-mastery in action. Identity comes first. Money comes after. Now, I understand that this might seem like I'm asking you to simply believe. And that's not it. I'm not asking for blind faith. I'm showing you a mechanism. A mechanism that works the same way a car engine works. If you don't turn on the engine, the car doesn't move. It doesn't matter if the road is perfectly smooth. It doesn't matter if the destination is clear on the GPS. The engine here is your identity. And turning on that engine isn't an event that happens once. It's a process that happens every single day. Every morning when you get up, every moment you make a small decision, every time you choose to act in a way that's aligned with the person you want to become, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Think about the people you admire, not the ones who look good on screen, the ones who actually have that quality of clarity in their life. They didn't get there because one day they got lucky. They got there because, little by little, day after day, they built a version of themselves that deserved that place. And the energy they radiate, that feeling that everything is in the right place, that's not innate personality. It's the result of a well-defined purpose that translates into daily action. I live that now, not perfectly, not without difficult days, but with a clarity that I never had before. An energy that doesn't come from adrenaline, doesn't come from compulsion, doesn't come from fear of failing. It comes from knowing where I'm going. And that inside-out change, is exactly what part 3 of this series is going to show. How to activate that system that the most successful people use without talking about it, what I call the abundance frequency, and how your entire life, not just the financial one, starts to reorganize when you change the frequency at which you're operating. You've made it this far, and that already says something about you. I'm not talking about views or screen time. I'm talking about the fact that something inside you decided that this conversation mattered. Something decided it was worth listening to with attention, even if it caused discomfort. That's the first signal that your frequency is already changing. Change doesn't begin when life changes. It begins when you decide that you're going to change. What happened here in this part 1 was an exercise in opening up. I showed you the mechanism, not the complete solution, but the way the problem actually works underneath the surface. The daily habits that seem innocent and that are actually keeping you on a ear that doesn't match the place where you want to be. The way your identity determines everything. Before money, before the plan, before any strategy. In the next parts, we're going to dive into the how. How to rewrite that identity. How to activate the system that the people who are ahead are using. How to convert inner clarity into real financial direction. But that's only going to work if you bring with you what happened here. Not everything needs to have made sense yet. What matters is that you felt something. So here's my request to you, and I ask you to take this seriously. If this video awakens something in you, something that maybe hasn't been expressed in a long time, write in the comments what decision you're ready to take on starting today. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to seem impressive. It just needs to be real. Because it's in the small decisions that the frequency changes. And it's in the frequency that life changes.